The Great Peace Conference begins. The Ottoman Parliament is dissolved and there is military conflict in the east. In this episode of Salvation and Catastrophe, the Greek-Turkish War, 1919-1923. On 1st December 1918, the Association for Defense of the National Rights is founded in Izmir, Smyrna. Others follow suit in eastern Thrace. Like the Kars and Adrahan Muslim Council, the goal was to make public the opposition of the Muslim populations to potential Greek rule by mobilizing the Wilsonian principle of nationality. They were organized by local Committee of Union and Progress, Ittihat ve Terakki cadres, sometimes with the support of local military and gendarmerie officers. On 2nd December 1918, Tevfik Pasha, the Grand Vizier, reimposes press censorship. Now, this is in reaction to the attacks on his administration, both from those that are opposed to his pro-Entente policy, like Mustafa Kemal Pasha, and also from those who consider him too soft against the Committee of Union and Progress, like Damat Ferit Pasha. On 5th December 1918, the initial meetings for the Great Peace Conference that is going to resolve the questions opened by the ending of World War I is begun in London. The other day, on 6th December 1918, Venizelos, the Greek Prime Minister, returns from his trip to Europe between 21st October and 3rd December, where he visited the various anti-capitals, to be declared worthy of the nation by the Greek Parliament. The next day he leaves for Paris, where he gets rooms in the Hotel Mercedes for the Greek delegation to the Paris Peace Conference. Between 7th and 13th December 1918, military clashes erupt between the Armenian Democratic Republic and the Democratic Republic of Georgia. The conflict is over the disputed Lori zone. The Armenian population there is considerable and perhaps could even be a majority, but the territory is strategically important for the security of the Georgian capital of Tiflis. Armenian-Georgian relations had already been strained by the unwillingness of the Armenian Republic to openly break with the White Russian anti-Bolshevik movement under General Anton Denikin, which in turn was unwilling to accept an independent Georgia and Azerbaijan. And on the other hand, the resentment of the Armenians for the role of the Georgians in the dissolution of the Transcaucasian Federation earlier in 1918. The fighting embarrasses both governments and makes it harder for an Armenian-Georgian cooperation against common foes. On 11th December 1918, Coleman Abdullah Pasha resigns as war minister. He simply could not survive the opposition of the First World War veterans in the General Staff and War Ministry against him. He is replaced by his Chief of Staff, Cevat Pasha, later on known as Jobanli, while Fevzi Pasha, later known as Chakmak, became the new Chief of the General Staff. Now, this change further strengthens the faction within the government that is friendly to Mustafa Kemal Pasha, later known as Atatürk. Between 14th and 16th December 1918, Tevfik Pasha inaugurates the Istanbul-Constantinople military courts against members of the 1914-1918 Committee of Union and Progress administration accused of war crimes and crimes against the Armenians. The inauguration of these trials was an excuse for the many domestic opponents of the Committee of Union and Progress to get vengeance. This includes members of the reconstituted Freedom and Concord Party, Hurriyet ve İtilaf Firkası of Damat Ferit Pasha, which had ruled the Ottoman Empire in 1912-1913 and had been purged after the raid on the Sublime Porte. So there's a general witch hunt launched against Ittihadists, some of them who actually did deserve to be put on trial, but some of them who had nothing to do with the violations of human rights and human security and the laws of war during the war. On 18 December 1918, Eleftherios Venizelos, Prime Minister of Greece, meets with President Woodrow Wilson of the United States. This was part of his propaganda campaign to maneuver the three powerful Entente leaders to support Greek claims in Anatolia, Asia Minor. He already had the support of Lloyd George, but they needed to overcome the skepticism and hostility of key British decision makers to a Greek expansion, especially the War Office and the Colony Office. French Prime Minister Clemenceau disliked modern Greeks, and while he had a working respect for Venizelos, was not very enthusiastic or really even interested in events in the East beyond his adamant opposition to the Bolshevik regime in the Russian Socialist Federated Soviet Republic. To win his support, Venizelos offered the Greek army to join the French expedition dispatched to Odessa in order to support the anti-Bolshevik forces of General Anton Denikin. Denikin acted as a magnet for French interests, and since he was opposed to the independence of Georgia and Azerbaijan, this led to an unwillingness of France to see considerable resources sent to the Caucasian republics, including Armenia. Venizelos himself hoped that the planned expedition will never take place, and believed that his pledge of support was more than enough to give him some leverage over the French government. Finally, Woodrow Wilson was the unknown factor for everybody. Venizelos presented himself as an advocate of the Wilsonian ideals and was especially keen on the idea of the League of Nations, since even as back as 1908, long before he became Greek Prime Minister, Venizelos considered the creation of some kind of confederation, Balkan Pact, Balkan Federation, including all Balkan states and the Ottoman Empire, as a key to Greek security. But American missionary interest and conflicting oil interests between the British, the Americans, and the French led to some opposition among American circles to a Greek domination of Western Anatolia or Istanbul, Constantinople. Venizelos' goal, which was also a goal of Lloyd George, was to divert the Americans with a mandate over Armenia. Finally, he needed the support of the Big Three to overcome the vociferous opposition by the Italian government, especially the Minister of Foreign Affairs, Baron Sonino, who had already recently rebuffed attempts by Venizelos to initiate talks to resolve the clashing Greek-Italian interests in the Eastern Mediterranean. On 20th December 1918, the third audience of Mustafa Kemal Pasha and the Sultan takes place. The Sultan remains determined to keep Mustafa Kemal Pasha on his side, and this might partly explain why Mustafa Kemal Pasha was not arrested during the wave of arrests of Committee of Union and Progress members that followed the inauguration of the war tribunals. On 21st December 1918, the next day, Sultan Mehmed VI dissolved the Ottoman Parliament, about to vote against Tevfik Pasha, but not the Ottoman Senate. Elections are promised for next year. Minber, the newspaper which Mustafa Kemal Pasha supported together with the Ottoman Liberal People's Party, ceases publication. Now, in this period, it is very likely that Mustafa Kemal Pasha started contacts with the Italian High Commissioner Count Carlo Sforza, who were seeking local actors to oppose a Greek expansion in Western Anatolia. He also met at an unspecified period with Ali Fuat, a personal friend and fellow military academy graduate. That created contacts with the commander of the 12th Corps in Iconium Konya under Colonel Fahrettin, later known as Altay. He also talked with Kazim Pasha, later known as Karabekir. The same day, the Adana Association of Defense of National Rights is founded, opposing the expansion of French rule into the area and the return of the survivors of the Armenian genocide. This brings to an end 1918. A devastating war has just ended. Throughout Anatolia, war-weary peasants are demobilized to start the long treks back home. There is hope for peace, but also trepidation for the future. For Ottoman Greeks and Ottoman Armenians, there is the long and dangerous trek back to their houses, unsure of who they will find occupying them. There is hope for the liberation from Ottoman Muslim rule, and in some hearts a thirst for vengeance. For Ottoman Muslims, the end of the war brings back home their loved ones, long conscripted to fight in faraway places such as Galicia or Bursa or Basra down in Mesopotamia. Indeed, the great-grandfather of one of my personal friends walked all the way from the Galicia front back to Istanbul in 1918. For Rumelian Muslim refugees and those who got the properties of exterminated or deported Ottoman Greeks and Armenians, it is a period of fear, both of renewed expulsion and of vengeance. In the east and the west of Anatolia, those Ottoman Muslims fear being given over to the rule of Greeks and Armenians. In Istanbul, Kars and Izmir, those Ottoman Muslims that identify as Turks agonize over the Entente violations of the Armistice of Mudros-Mondros and over the promises made by great powers to the Greeks and Armenians. Committee of Union and Progress members sulk and hide in Istanbul, worried about their lives. In Paris and in Athens, in London and in Istanbul, Eleftherios Venizelos works tirelessly, cajoling, charming, and bargaining with the leaders of the great powers in pursuit of giving Greeks finally a realization of a version of the Megali idea. In Yildiz and Dolmabahce Palace, the Sultan breathes a sigh of relief, as unlike the Romanovs, Habsburgs, or Hohenzollerns, the scion of Osman is still on his throne. But this throne is very, very, very insecure, at risk. It is threatened by the great powers. It is threatened by his own people. It is threatened by the accommodationists like Damat Ferit Pasha and the hardliners like Mustafa Kemal Pasha, where he is caught between the rising forces of nationalism on one side and of capitalist imperialism on the other. The end of the First World War was supposed to bring peace. And for many in the Ottoman Empire, it did mean the end of an ordeal. For the Muslim peasant conscripted in the army, the Greek deportee, and the Armenian survivor of genocide. But for far too many, the peace brought with it insecurity, worry, and threat. The new year was dawning, a year of high hopes and darkest despair, a year of war. I would like to thank my fiancée, Jeren Mert, for making her house available for the recording of these episodes. Her support is very important and has helped me go forward with this. I would also like to wish you all a happy new year in 2019. I hope that 2019 is a year of hope and not dark despair. That unlike our ancestors 100 years ago, we work hard to avoid the threat of war and inhumanity between and within our countries. Thus, to you all, thank you for watching, thank you for subscribing, thank you for liking, and a happy new year to you and yours. Next episode will be in late January 2019. For this episode, my sources were Stefano Ioannis Stefano, τα κείμενα του Ελευθερίου Βενιζέλου, the documents of Eleftherios Venizelos. Andrew Mango Ataturk, Eric Yuker, the Young Turk Legacy, and Michael Elwin Smith, Ionian Vision. Thank you very much. See you next year.